Leslie Johnson, a member of the City Club's Board of Governors. For over 100 years, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and explore. We're gathered at the Sentinel Hotel, along with all of you listening on OPB or viewing on OpenSignal or YouTube. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners enables us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum sponsors are Family Care Health and Northwest Natural. Please join me in showing our appreciation for our sponsors. Thank you. Dave's Killer Bread started as a small family bakery in Milwaukie. It has gone on to be the best-selling organic bread in the country. But the story of co-founder Dave Dahl includes ongoing battles with addiction and bipolar depression. Though not all his battles were successful, Dave continues to be an advocate for business, mental health, and giving ex-felons another chance. Today, Dave is our special guest. He will be interviewed by Dr. Alisha Moreland-Capuia, an OHSU physician specializing in addiction medicine. She's developer of Healing Hurt People, a national violence prevention program. She is also director of the Avel Gordly Center for Healing. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
We want to make sure that our mics are on. What Dave and I are going to effectively do is ignore all of you, and we're going to have a conversation, and you will have the privilege of being able to view that conversation. So Dave, I wanted to first say thank you for coming today, and thank you for your willingness to share your story.
I'm so honored, thank you.
Thank you. How I wanted to start today, as I was thinking and reflecting about the opportunity to sit with you, I was reviewing a poem by Langston Hughes, and it's called Mother to Son. And it starts out like this. It says, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. Yet I keep climbing, and eventually reaching the top. And I thought that this was appropriate because today we're going to be talking about, yes, some trials, but overwhelmingly your triumphs. And this idea of having to climb these metaphorical stairs that's had a lot of stuff in it. But the hope is that eventually you did get to the top. So where I want to start today is if you could maybe just share a little bit about your metaphorical climb up those rough stairs.
Well, that's been a very long story. I remember not having a story as a youngster and thinking I have nothing to tell people about myself. And then I set out to go out and make my own story. So it just went, from that point on, it just went crazy. I had very low self-esteem. I didn't believe in myself, and I was always proving to myself that I was no good because I believed it. And eventually started doing drugs and going to prison. Went to prison 4 times, and I figured out the 4th time around that I could do something different. I had an epiphany, and even from that point on, it wasn't all roses, but it's been pretty cool because I've been capable of dealing with my mistakes and my failures as part of my growth.
And I think that that's wonderful. I think it's always really tough to kind of have to be at the peak of your vulnerability in front of other folks, but this has really been a story where you have taken your struggles and have supported others along the way to encourage. So can you talk a little bit about how you've managed to do that, some of that work?
Well, yeah, in the days of Dave's Killer Bread, I had kind of a perfect storm of opportunity to promote the bread at the same time that I was out fulfilling sort of a need in the community for inspiration for young kids, at-risk kids, all kids, and people in prison, people in general, lots of business people. I mean, I talked to thousands of people. And the story just meant a lot to them like it did to me. And I just kept telling it until I started having sort of, I started celebrating a little too much and eventually became alcoholic, and rest is history.
Okay. Well, you know, it's interesting. So we jumped through, kind of leaped through a few pieces very quickly there. I guess what I'm wanting to make sure that we get a full understanding of is that there was a process, you know, that you went through at some point along your path. There were many people along your path who extended grace. And grace is one of those things that we never really deserve, but people give it to us, and it helps us kind of make our way. It makes the road up those stairs a little easier. So can you maybe talk about, along your path, some people who have been in that path to support you along the way?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to come from where I came from, where nobody would give me the time of day and people would cross the street to avoid me. I started, you know, I had a transformation in prison that made me more palatable, I guess. And my brother my brother's in the audience right now, Glenn, gave me an opportunity to come back to the family business after I'd really been a knucklehead for a lot of years. And that was the beginning of it. And from that point on, I had just amazing reception from people in the community, and the opportunity to go out and give back, as you know, it was as good for me as it was for anybody. And, you know, those opportunities I just can't thank people enough for.
So I think that that's great, you know, that you are now at a space in time where you can kind of retrospectively think about the folks who were important in that process. So as I said, we were talking about some of the trials, right? The kind of being entangled with the law at one point, then getting involved at some point with substances. What was your true turning point? What made you turn and move in a direction away from those things?
That was that's the point in my life that everything changed. I was 38 years old. I was in prison. It was 2001, and I was suicidal. I had been suicidal for a long time. I didn't have any courage. I didn't want to live. I didn't know what there was to live for. And every night I kept thinking, you know, maybe I can get some help. Maybe these things called antidepressants could be helpful to me. And I didn't believe it for the longest time, but I had to give something a try. And I finally, one night after a really bad night of not being able to sleep and sweating and being stressed out and worrisome, I put in a piece of paper, I put it in the box, and I asked for help from the authorities. It's kind of like in prison, you don't really want to tell on yourself. You know, you want to be tough. You want to appear tough and strong, and I wasn't. I wasn't strong at all, and I needed help. And I got that help when I put that kite in. And I think part of it was the meds, and part of it was the humility that it took, and eventually the courage that I got from that situation changed my life.
I think that's very powerful. For those of you who are joining us, we are on OPB. I am joined by the co-founder of Dave Killer's Bread, Dave Dahl, and I am Alisha Moreland-Capuia. Dave, thank you for that description and story of explaining sort of the turning point and the things that sort of matter to you. I know that folks came here today looking for inspiration because, you know, some of us may find ourselves, you are a reflection of many people that, or folks, and even maybe ourselves, a reflection of people in our family that we love and care about and want to help. And I think what was powerful, and I want to really sort of underscore the point, is that you said you determined that you would not only needed the help, but would accept the help. Can you maybe explain just a little bit more about that process and how that came down to you? Was it sort of a rock bottom moment? Was it a realization? How did that come to you for those who may be dealing with similar things? What light could you shed on that process?
I don't think that I could be any more, in my mind, pathetic at that time. I didn't think that I could overcome. In my early life, I just didn't believe in anything. and the suffering that caused, the adversity, a long period of that eventually resulted in, instead of humiliation, it was like, what do I have to lose anymore? I am so low, how can I go any lower? And all of a sudden I didn't care what anybody thought of me. All these other convicts in prison, it was like I was willing to take an ass whooping and just do what I had to do because it was the right thing to do, and I finally knew that. And if there's anything I can tell people, it's be real. Be real. Come to grips with who you are, and if you got a problem, deal with it, and don't worry about what anybody else thinks, because that's what I did. And I just from that point on, it was like I fought people on a regular basis who disagreed with me, and I had the strength to do it because I was just being me and being real.
So I think what I hear from that is radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Just, I'm going to accept the reality of what it is and then recognize and acknowledge your sense of power to make change even at your lowest point.
Yes, and once I saw that, once I had that experience, it gave me courage to have other, falls and overcome them. It's like, if I can overcome that, I can start to overcome anything.
And I think that's if for those of you who are tweeting on Twitter, that is a tweetable a thing
hashtag
there. That's or a hashtag that if I could, this power, the power of overcoming and recognizing that if you've had to overcome the worst thing in your life, that maybe it is a testament or even preparation for overcoming even harder things. So
I see people all the time that inspire me because they have worse situations that they overcome. People in wheelchairs that are like quadriplegic and paint with their mouths, for example. Those are people, I don't know if I have that courage. That's amazing courage to me.
Amazing courage. Well, to that end, Dave, I also want to talk about, again, because we're talking about trials, but also triumph. And I think you've had your share of trials, and we all have. But I want to kind of move in a direction of, so you've, explained kind of thoroughly that you got to this point where you kind of got yourself, again, as I said, entangled with the law, and then you were kind of at the peak of your vulnerability. And then you said that your brother, who is somewhere in the room, took a chance on you. I ask about this concept, hi brother, thank you brother, right? Is that your brother then extended grace, and that he said to you, I see something in you, and I see that you can be great. And so he opened up the door, literally, to allow you to come in and to start this process of creating, right? So can we start there about this grace and the door opened and how it then transformed into this huge, I just had a piece of your toast this morning with peanut butter, and so it's not a small feat, right? That for you to be able to overcome in the way that you have, in the recognition that you are incredibly human like the rest of us, but these opportunities that people give and the power of love as healing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, that's a hard one.
That should be the easiest part.
Yeah. Well, there's a long story to that. But when I was in prison, I had the good fortune, and this is something I want people to hear. I had the good fortune of going to into a vocational training program that it was computer-aided drafting, and it was part of what transformed. Made me able to create, made me realize that I could create things from by filling a need. And so I did that in prison, and kind of wanted to keep going that way. But my brother and I got together and started talking about what we could do with the family business. And from that point on, it was I was very fortunate to have the support of of a family. Although if you can only imagine the challenges of a family in business together, it's not all piece of cake.
No, it's a piece of bread.
There you go.
Boom, boom, boom. I need
Nice.
a drum set up here. Come on, guys. No, but but in all seriousness, this idea, though, of being able to kind of bake your troubles away and sort of create, opening up the opportunity for you to use the full of who you are and explore more deeply your sense of purpose. It seemed to me in reading your story, which is a very powerful one, that a lot of your sense of purpose came through being able to create and to bake that bread and to tell your story in such a powerful way. I mean, it's impacting millions of people. Eat the bread and learn of your story and are inspired.
That's, I remember thinking when I started telling my story in 2005 and things, it was, if I could help one person, then I will have fulfilled my purpose, right? And it eventually, after years went by, I started getting like feedback, people saying, hey, my son, or myself, I started my own business and it's doing all right, and all these little success stories that I started hearing. And I know there's a lot of those out there, and each one of those success stories goes out and creates more success stories. Exactly. And it's just exponential.
And I think you're absolutely right. I was also reading that at one point you had started a program sort of for the reentry population, so that around approximately at the time, under your leadership, that there was about 30% of the employees that you were hiring were folks who were coming right out of the prison system. So not only were you doing good, yourself, but you were opening up the door for others too as well. So can you talk a little bit about that and what inspired that decision for you?
You bet. That was natural. That was the natural progression because, first of all, if someone's ready, if one of those people has learned their lesson and has had their own epiphany and done the work while they were in prison to change, then that person becomes a highly motivated employee opportunity, and nobody else wants to hire this great person. And here you are, you get to hire some great person out of prison. It isn't always like that, but if you play your cards right, you get really good people. And you want success stories. You get so many of them, and you see their families are affected, and the community is affected, and the world is affected by each one of these transformations that takes place. And you want to be part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think that that's very, very powerful. Not only did you participate in helping to build the economy, right, that you helped to support really criminal justice reform, because I think we've worked, even here in the state of Oregon, I think we'd like to think that we're progressive around these issues in terms of how you support over 590,000 persons a year coming out of the prison, both federal and state systems, how you support them coming back into a community, how you help to establish and give people a sense of meaning. And I think what the recent literature shows is that folks, when they come out, and if they are not engaged and do not have a job, that they are more likely to end up back in prison and or to commit a crime because they don't have resources. So you were in fact contributing to the betterment of the society in I think being an example to other business owners to what they can do to be a part of the solution. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, we should clap for that. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome. They didn't know we're having a conversation, but we're also dropping little policy statements here, right? Okay. The other thing I wanted to just kind of chat with you about, just sort of in general, is that you have been very, very vocal and supportive. I think we live in a society right now where what folks don't understand, they begin to criticize. But we have an opportunity as social agents for change, and because you're like on every truck that drives to deliver Dave's Killer Bread everywhere, that there's an opportunity to use the platform for good. And so I have always made the argument that every single one of us, every single human being should be concerned about their mental health. And that mental health is different from mental illness. And that as a society, we have a responsibility to work to support and to provide those types of support for everyone. I happen to know that you support very strongly NAMI and other organizations. And so could you talk a little bit about why that's important to you in terms of giving back and supporting and debunking the myths around mental illness?
Yeah, because I've had such an amazing experience around that. You know, I finally realized and was willing to admit to myself that I had mental illness, but I didn't. All of a sudden, I was like, well, okay, you can get sick. You know, it's okay. I'm not sick all the time, and I can do something about it. Once I found out I could do something about it, then it was like, wow, I can help others to do that too, and they can help others. And, you know, this thing about stigma of mental illness, and you know, the fact is, I know that I'm a good guy, right? And yet, I've done some bad things. And I would say that every time I did those bad things, I was mentally ill, you know? And I think that a lot of people could say the same thing if they wanted to admit it, that they've been mentally ill from at one point or another. And so they should possibly start looking at others with compassion who suffer these mental illnesses, and they can be treated, and they can, you know, they can be just great people. The thing is, a bipolar person, you know, there's a lot of bipolar people out there in one way or another, and that bipolar mentality that I had, the bipolar condition that I had, actually contributed, I believe, to my success. The same thing that makes you laugh can make you cry.
I think well said, and I would say that you are yes. You wanna, yeah. Well, I know Walter wants to clap for you. And I would say that if you had diabetes or if you had congestive heart failure, you'd go in to get treatment for congestive heart failure, right? And so the fact that, again, it gets back to personal power and knowing that things can be treated. So I personally want to thank you for working on behalf of helping to debunk the myths and to remove the stigma. We all deserve that level of support, and so thank you for that. The other subject that's sort of pretty hot, is a hot topic, and I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, Dave, is, you know, back in the early 1970s when the opiate epidemic was high, and then in the 80s when the crack epidemic was high, it was actually considered a public safety issue, right? So if you had a drug problem, you go straight to jail for you. Now that there's a recognition that substance use impacts the wider WIDER community, it is now being, yes, not whiter, but wider, maybe one and the same, but it is now being noted as a public health issue as opposed to a public safety issue. So now that it's being noted as a public health issue, there is more support being wrapped around persons who are maybe challenged by substance use. Do you have thoughts about what can be done, what should be done, what was helpful for you in order to be able to manage the substance use or the addiction issue?
Yeah, first of all, I had to realize that it was a problem and not the solution. As a youngster, methamphetamine seemed like the solution for me. It was the first time when I did that first hit of methamphetamine, my life transformed immediately. It was instant. Instantly, I felt confident. I felt like I could go out and make stuff happen. So it was like the first transformation of my life, and it wasn't a good one, but it seemed like it was because I felt good. And so, you know, since then, other drugs have been, I've enjoyed other drugs that I thought that I could handle, mainly alcohol. Alcohol is to me as big a problem as any of them. It was for me, and actually there's alcohol that contributed to my biggest bad experience. So, but heroin and opiates in general, they're very addictive, very difficult to get off of, and they're very costly to get off of. It's my experience. So it certainly would be great to offer. I mean, they have great stuff out there. They have Vivitrol for people to get off opiates and alcohol. I think that's an amazing drug, but I think it needs to be a lot cheaper for people. So, I don't know. That's what are you asking me exactly?
Yeah, no, I think that you've began to answer it, and it's just a conversation. Wanted to get your opinions. For those of you who are joining us on OPB, I'm Alisha Moreland-Capuia, and I am joined by the co-founder of Dave's Killer Bread, David Dahl. Dave, that was just literally a question, because I think that we're up against quite a bit geopolitically in terms of funding for support services for folks who are challenged by substance use and mental illness, and that we're at a point in time where I think we're at sort of we're right on the precipice of something really awesome. And you're absolutely right that there are treatments that are helpful, and we need to make sure that everyone has access to them. And so just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that access and how helpful it can be.
Well, can I say just one more thing?
Absolutely.
I think, what is wrong with our country and our world when it's so readily available? And the drug dealers are pharmaceutical companies. It's like, what can we do about that? It's just too easy to get. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll give you 50 cents for that. Dave, I also want to just kind of make a little bit of a theme shift here. And I want to get to, again, sort of the triumphs. Can you share with us maybe a story or a testimonial of someone whose life was changed by being able to be employed by your company?
Where do I begin there? I can actually point to someone at the first table there.
We got several witnesses, people testifying, saying me, so that's good. Yeah.
Well, to begin with, is Estelle, and she used to be my next door neighbor, and so did that guy. And she came to work, but they were both, well, you were already a good boy by then, but she was just turning it, we're all a bunch of knuckleheads, and she's made a career out of Dave's Killer Bread, and these guys are doing great. I knew Mark in prison. He was, I'm going to talk about his relationship, but he was a real knucklehead, one of the worst. And now he's 15 years clean and sober, and he's a completely different guy. And the same with Estelle, his wife. She was never the level of knucklehead that he is, but Dave's Killer Bread gave her an opportunity, and it's just there's a lot of those people in the company, and it should be everywhere.
I would agree, and can we just clap for that? That's awesome that you've been clean and sober. I mean, and that is really kind of the general gestalt, right? That's the subtext here today, is the power of a second, third, fourth, and sometimes fifth chance, right? That everyone deserves it, and that at some point we're asking folks to not give up on situations, not give up on people, because you too can end up, as quite as successful as Dave has been, even through the struggle. So
that's what I want to see.
Yeah, and so I don't want to take your clothes. What I want to allow for is for you, Dave. What message would you like to leave with the audience today? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to leave with?
Well, I think that it's my story and my experience tells me that everyone can change, and we should have compassion for people, but we should also give people a hand up and not a handout. I'm a big believer in helping people get to where they can be, but they need to do most of the work. Give them the opportunity, and that's the case with most of the success stories at Dave's Killer Bread. And I believe it's the way to success for everyone. And how can we give people more opportunities to come up when they're ready, and give them, programs where they can learn, like I did in prison, the drafting program. And they're not available. They're really not that readily available in prison. And so there's got to be opportunities in prison and elsewhere for people to improve themselves so that they're ready for an opportunity. And then when they're ready for that opportunity, they can go crazy. They can change the world.
I think you're yeah. That's absolutely right. So then I also wanted to ask you, when you wake up in the morning, what's your mantra? What do you tell yourself to stay encouraged and positive?
I guess I don't actually. There's no words or anything, but it's like a feeling that, wow, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be able to get up and jump up and go to work, and not be like in prison or otherwise or addicted. That I'm able to make stuff happen every day, and I'm basically a free man. And I guess without thinking about it, that's what inspires me every day to get going.
Freedom is a great motivator, isn't it? Yeah, yes. So I want to go back.
Mentally too.
Yeah, what'd you say now?
Especially the mental freedom.
Yes, mental, physical, just freedom is a very powerful concept. I want to go back to how I started, and I want you to kind of reflect on this, and I want the audience to reflect on this, because we were literally kind of telling a story today. I began with Langston Hughes' Mother to Son, and Langston Hughes, as a powerful, prolific writer, wrote, "Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor bare. Yet I keep climbing and reaching." So what I would invite all of you who are here with us today, and even invite you to, Dave, to reflect on, is this process called life, this thing called life, the stairs that you might find yourselves on, the tacks and the thorns that may be there, the bareness of those stairs, but the fact that we all continue to climb and eventually get to the top, and to think about the things that support your climb to the top. Now, Dave has done a masterful job here of telling us about his personal story and his climb: education, opportunities, grace, love, people loving him through, to, for, in spite of, in lieu of, because of, and what opportunities we have to make our way to the top, but to also assist others on their way to the top of those metaphorical stairs. So as we reflect on that, Dave, I want to give you the final 2 minutes here. If you don't take the 2 minutes, it's okay, but just your final thoughts on that as we reflect and get ready to transition to the audience questions.
I don't know why. I mean, there's this law in the universe that I happen to have tapped into from time to time, where the more I give, the more I get, and you don't give, when you don't give with the thought of getting, you get more, and with the old days of Dave's Killer Bread, there was a sense of purpose to help other people, and to basically, as you said, help myself by helping other people. But it wasn't helping myself financially or as professionally, it was, as much as it was, this was an opportunity to change the world. And I think that everybody can be a part of that. I think that the people that don't have faith, I didn't have any faith, I didn't have any belief, I didn't trust. And now today I have all that. It's not conventional, but I have it all. And I just believe that everyone can do it. I mean, because if I can, there's no reason why anybody can't do it. I'm talking to anybody. That's my story.
I think that's awesome. So the last final question from me is this before we transition. Now that you're retired, what's next for you?
Well, in 2013, I had an incident that was very highly publicized, and it was really very disastrous, and it was tough to overcome. It was another opportunity for me to practice overcoming. About a year after that, I was still struggling with sort of the mania, the hypomania, and I dealt with some serious depression and all those things. But I finally got evened out, and I discovered eBay. And on eBay, I started buying masks for my walls. And next thing you know, it was the forms of the African masks that got my attention. And I mean, the African masks going back to tribes that were, untouched by Western society and all that stuff. But, there's a lot of that going on. And I at this point, I have 2 warehouses and a couple of storage units and storage containers full of it. So the reason, I remember thinking to myself that if I do this, I like this. This is great. It makes me forget about me. And that's what I've been doing. I've been getting behind the mask, if you will. And now I'm kind of done with that, and I'm ready. I'm still doing that, and that's what we're going to do. I discover African art. Google it. But that's what we're going to do. But I'm out now, getting away from that, being behind the mask. I want to get out there and help again.
Interesting. Being behind the mask. There's so many directions we can go with that metaphor there. But for now, I'm going to remind us all. For those of you joining us on OPB, I'm Alisha Moreland-Capuia, and I have the great privilege of being joined by the co-founder of Dave Killer's Bread, Dave Dahl. So this idea of sort of the next chapter and with the mask and whatnot, what are you hoping to accomplish overall?
Well, I'd like to do some good things with my company again. I'd like to be more than face value as a business. Be sort of they used to call it a social enterprise, but I just want to make a difference. And so I see, I already have some ex-felons working for me, and other people that just need to have a job, and that's kind of cool. And but the money that I've spent, I've had the privilege of seeing it being used actually in Africa. And I recently got a bunch of pictures from a container full of grain that was dropped in Mali. And I was just like, now that's cool, And other than that, I want to introduce people to this art form. It's really cool. And I just hope other people can be passionate about it just a little bit, because I'm like that, I mean, it's just amazing to me.
Well, again, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to tell your story. Thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do to serve others. It is indeed an inspiration. So can we please give a round of applause for Dave?
Thank you.
We are now going to transition to the audience for some questions. And I just have a little bit of instruction to give. If you've written a question on an index card, hold it high for staff to collect. You can also submit questions through Twitter using the hashtag #FridayForum. And if you're at the microphone, it's a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. So we'll start. I started with a card question already, but we'll start at the microphone, and I'll ask that you kindly identify yourself as a City Club member. And here's the challenge, folks, that you ask one question in 30 seconds or less.
Milwaukie, City Club member. As a member of a family where my brother had manic depression problems and ended up on drugs, and took him 6 or 7 times to come through it. And when you love that person, you want to help them, but then you don't allow them to hit the bottom. What would be your advice to family people who want to help someone they love, and it's just very confusing?
Well, you don't want them to die, and you don't want them to, to suffer beyond, beyond what is humanly possible. But I suffered a ton. And if I hadn't been left to my own devices for a long period of time, kind of given up on by my family, I don't know if I'd suffered enough to get to the point where I could overcome it. And so I have a hard time. I struggle with it myself with, people in my life. Am I enabling them? How can I help them? By being nice and feeling good about what I'm doing, I'm actually doing more harm than good. So I would say tough love, that's all I can say. The best you can do it.
And I would actually add to that it's really tough when you're a family member and you want more for someone than they want for themselves in the moment. That's where you find your greatest disappointment. But also, what I like to invite people to do things. What I would invite you to consider is to think about the process of change and how it happens. How long does it take to form a habit? I can't hear. What'd you say?
2 weeks.
How long does it take to break it? It could potentially take a lifetime. And it's this idea of how change happens and how we want to be supported through a change process. It is always super difficult to watch someone you love suffering, but also there is this, what we can't forget about is our basic humanity, that someone loved us enough at some point to wipe our bottoms as kids to make sure we were well fed and those things. So there has to be some aspect of loving people, forming compassionate boundaries, but still loving people through their issues, because that's what family does. There has to be an assurance at some point that no matter what you do and no matter how far you go, that the love is still there. That's the beauty of family, and that's where the healing takes place. So I would just extend and offer that, invite you to think about that. Doesn't make it easier, but it's a reality.
Bill Dickey, City Club member. Your story is inspiring. I have almost 22 years of sobriety myself, and I got 3 years 3 times. So for anybody that's in the program, they understand that means I relapsed a couple times. But my question's about that yellow label good seed bread that I am addicted to. And my house, my trip to the store is the moment that loaf is empty, I'm back to the store. And I don't know what makes it so good. It's what is obviously the seeds on the outside, but the good seed bread. And so give us some bakery knowledge on that stuff.
Well, I got to be careful not to give up any trade secrets. I don't own the company, any of the company anymore anyway, so I got to be careful. But the bottom line is, when I went to make this bread, I was thinking, what I would like in bread, and what I had. It was kind of something that incubated all the way through my life. That I like bread with texture. I like bread with chew. I like cereal in the morning that is crunchy. I like it with a chew, and it just has substance in your mouth. And when somebody overcooks oatmeal, it's terrible to me. But when it's cooked just right, it's amazing, and that's what I was aiming for with the bread more than anything else. Simple, huh? Not easy, but simple.
Thank you, Anthony Petchel, City Club member, and I had the blues bread this morning for breakfast.
That's the first one, yeah.
And my favorite. So, as a business owner, you pioneered kind of giving people second chance opportunities who were coming out of the criminal justice system. What advice would you give to other business owners and leaders in this room about overcoming those stereotypes and stigmas that get attached to people who are coming out of prison?
Yeah, that's a good one. People what we want is success stories. We don't want to give people jobs who aren't ready for them. A person who has done the work can be, like I said, an amazing employee. They're just waiting for an opportunity to prove that. And if an employer can develop a program where they interview such a person and find out, well, what has this person been up to all these years they were in prison, for example? What have they done to prove that they are the right candidate for this job? And when we did it, we never went, okay, we're going to go hire an ex-felon. We just hired the best person that we had available at that time, and sometimes they were felons. And the reason why they were is because they were ready. They were exceptional. And that's what I want other people to realize, that they can have success stories by doing their homework.
That's awesome. We've got a few questions on the cue cards here. So one question that came up is, Dave, literally they wrote your name out. Dave, please tell us more about your African art and what you've learned about it.
Well, I am into the African art for the forms. I'm into the African art because I like it. Not so much, not just the ethnographic aspect of the story of it, which is interesting, but the art of it is what gets me. And just where does that come from? Somehow it speaks to me on a level that that is something I don't understand. And it's beautiful, and sometimes it's terrifying, and that's beautiful to me. And so I've learned a massive amount of, I've learned a ton about it. I mean, each time I hold one in my hand, I learn just a little bit more. And I don't know, I just love the stuff, and I want to pass it along to people. I just gave a couple of them away today.
Well, I think that that's interesting, right? Because the masks are representative of life. As you said, it's beautiful and terrifying, right? So you kind of are able to...
Well, these masks meant a lot to those
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
that made them. They meant a lot. They didn't have written language. They passed stories on down, verbally and with art.
Awesome. Another question that comes to you, Dave, is what kind of support can an employer provide to folks who've experienced similar trials as you? So what can an employer do to be supportive of someone who's...
I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, that you got to find the right person. Some people, honestly, will break your heart, and you're going to get that. You probably get that whether it's a felon or not at times. So you really want to pick the right people. You don't go, let's get your friend Joe because he's your friend. I'm sorry, that's not a good reason to hire someone. You hire someone because they're a good person, and they're ready to change, and they are changing and have changed, and now you're giving them another opportunity. And it's natural and automatic when that happens. From that point on, you want to give them support. You want to do everything you can for them, and they want to do everything they can for you.
Absolutely. We have another question at the mic.
Kurt Wavering, member. I'm very impressed, as all of us are, about you turning your life around and then building a business. And I do know that in building a business, you have to find money for people to invest and all. So how did you do that? How did you find banks or lenders or whatever it was?
That was a great question. That was a great moment in our history. It was like 2007 and 8 in there, and we were too small. We were too big for our britches already at that point. And the place we were at, the facility we were at in Northeast Portland was too small to do what we had to do. And so we moved to Bob's Red Mill's old facility, but it cost $1.5 million, if I remember right. And that was a lot of money. And thankfully, my brother, if it hadn't been for my brother having credit, having something to put up as collateral, we couldn't have done it. And then you put all that money up. Every time you front out thousands of loaves of bread to Costco or whatever, when you first do that, you're never going to get that money back because you're always waiting 30 days. So that's a lot of money you just spent to stock the shelves, and the cost of all the promotion and everything that we did most of it on a shoestring, and we did it ourselves, everywhere we could. And it paid off. We just worked really hard. And nobody wanted to loan to us, by the way. Wells Fargo wasn't going to loan anything to us. Sorry about that. But somebody came through and did it for us, and we made it. That just came out. I wasn't even thinking about it. Anybody from Wells Fargo here?
Okay, the other question that has come in the form of the card is, what inspires you, Dave, and why?
What inspires me? Well, I can look around the room and see someone right now, my good friend, Tim Vincent. He's struggling with, I don't even know what it's called, my friend, but challenging disease that it's not unlike what I've had to deal with in my life, where you had to overcome. But what he's overcoming right now, and he puts a smile on his face all the time. He's out there active. He's an activist about it. He's doing things in the community about it. He doesn't lay down and give up. And that is amazing to me, because his prognosis isn't that great, but he's a bad boy, and that inspires me.
Awesome. There was one last, oh yes, thank you. There was another question that was asked about sort of the prison system and programming in prisons, and I want to make sure that I get the question right, because I can't read some of the writing. Okay, so what are your thoughts, Dave, on the prison system and the programming that they have to offer? Do you think that it's rehabilitative? And I want to rephrase that by saying, I think when we use the word rehabilitation, there's an assumption that that folks who are being rehabilitated actually were habilitated in the first place. And so I'm wanting to maybe have a discussion about rehabilitation versus habilitation, where we actually help give people skills that they need and provide them with the skills so that they can do what they need to do. So what do you think about that?
It's a huge thing for me. It's like one of my biggest talking points when I was out speaking before. Because of the experience that I had, and I was waiting for 3 years on a list to get into the computer-aided drafting vocational tech program. I had no idea what it was. I'd never really been on a computer before. The learning curve was really steep for me. But once I got to where I could handle the computer and I started seeing what was going on, I started excelling. And I just think there's so many people waiting for opportunities like that. But the drag is that, a year after I got through the program, they took it away. And that's just the way it works. I hope that we can do more things in prison, but I also really want I want to be able to be part of things where people out here just, say, hey, let's do something for these guys and make them better, rather than go through the taxpayers. And I think there's a challenge to doing it through the government. I think that people can make it happen.
With that being said, I want to again thank you so very much, Dave, for sharing your story today, for giving us a window into your climb up those metaphorical stairs, and really appreciate it. Thank you for your inspirational story.
Thank you, Alisha.
We're out of broadcast time and we'll have to stop for the day. If this program has inspired you to join or contribute to City Club, you can still do so at the registration table as you leave the room. This is Leslie Johnson for the City Club of Portland. Please show one more time your thanks to our speakers for this program. We are adjourned.